Good evening and welcome to Grad School Gabbers, your source for trusted information on the assigned readings. I'm your host Siobhan Feeney, and on behalf of my team and I, we welcome you to this evening's edition. Settle in with a cold one or a cup of tea if that's the best you can do, and activate your synapses with us.
Alberta with Scott McDonald, the coach of the Assumption Junior Boys Basketball team. Thanks for being here, Scott.
You're welcome.
And today we're talking about assessment. Can you tell me why assessment is so important to your team?
Assessment is critical for my team in basketball because without assessment or regular assessment, my players would probably just continue on the current path, even if it's not an effective path.
So are you saying that you use assessments to evaluate your team's progress?
No, I use assessment for learning. So assessment for me and my team would be so we can work on what we can do to improve ourselves. So it'd be like the next steps.
Otherwise, I'm sure your team wouldn't know what they need to change or keep the same.
Exactly. That being said, some of the assessments are still really important. If the students never played a game, then they wouldn't really be as interested in the results.
Is it true that simply being assessed regularly does somewhat improve achievement and motivation?
Oh, absolutely.
I think they do get a lot of feedback other than just in the games, though.
Oh, yes, feedback's important. Feedback is knowing your level compared to the reference level of the others.
I'd imagine it's really important what players do with that feedback, though.
Yeah, it's crucial.
Shooting the ball and having it go in or not is a form of feedback, correct? But you give them direct feedback as well, yes?
Yes, I give my players quick feedback, especially when it's related to the direct play or the skill, and not just if they got it right.
You say quick feedback. Are there other forms of feedback that you find effective?
Oh yeah, like I give longer dialogue when I meet with the players, and it's not just about the players, it's about the task at hand.
Do you have specific guidelines that you try to follow when you're giving descriptive feedback?
Yeah, three key things I try to follow: where they are in their learning, where they're going, and what they need to do to get there.
When I hear you say longer dialogue, that doesn't sound like something that just happens on the fly or incidentally. Have you had to make any major changes to your learning environment for descriptive feedback and its uses?
Yes, I've had to organize my time and give the players specific feedback, and also work in time so that the players can use that feedback for their own learning.
So it's probably really important that players have time to actually act on the feedback you're giving and practice based on your advice.
Yes, it's crucial for them.
Over your many years of teaching and coaching, how has your understanding of assessment for learning changed?
My understanding of assessment for learning has changed from initially I just want to see that my players could do what I wanted them to do, and now I want to see that the processes have changed so that way the players themselves know what to do and know what to work on in order to get to where they need to get to. With my players and the assessment for learning, now they can self-regulate and they know how to work on what they have to work on. And that doesn't mean that I'm not important. I do still have to do the things I mentioned earlier, but now that my players can take a greater ownership in their own learning. Remember, formative assessment is only formative assessment. It forms your learning.
Great. Well, thank you for your time, Scott, and your players are lucky to have you.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yes! Back to you, Siobhan.
With the launch of the recent bestseller, The Nature of Learning, we thought it would be timely to discuss what actually goes on when we're trying to learn. It's something we do every day, but how much do we really know about it? To find out, we consulted neuroscientist Dr. Ross.
In the field of educational neuroscience, scientists are trying to determine how exactly our brains learn and how exactly our learning experiences interact to make changes in our brain development. Scientists are finding that genetics and learning experiences interact to literally shape the physical structure of the brain. The brain is made up of many different parts, including the visual cortex and the prefrontal cortex. When learning, people utilize 3 different networks. These networks can be broadly classified as recognition, strategic, and affective. Recognition networks take the information received from our environment and transforms this information into knowledge. This network helps categorize what we see, hear, or read. Strategic networks are used when we need to plan for a task or when we are setting goals. Affective networks involve the emotional aspects of learning, such as what our interests and motivations are and how stresses are handled. When we are learning something, these experiences are translated into chemical and electrical signals that create and expand connections between neurons. When it comes to connections between neurons, the old adage, use it or lose it, comes into play. Presynaptic neurons can help strengthen connections on postsynaptic neurons if the connection is active. However, less active connections become weakened over time if they're not used. Over time, with repeated activity, changes begin to occur in these synaptic connections, and significant changes in the brain's networks result. Now that we understand the physiology of the brain and learning, we can begin to use the research to inform our educational practices, policies, and design. There are many implications for the research from educational neuroscience. One such area focuses on the learning environment. We know that experience interacts with genetic predispositions to influence how the brain develops. In giving consideration to the learning environment, we can actually have an impact on how the brain is making learning connections and how the biology interacts with these learning experiences to shape the brain. Another area of focus is on recognizing the importance of emotions. Physiologically, emotion and cognition are intertwined, and as educators, consideration must be given to the role we play in our students' emotional development. Educational institutions have a responsibility to help students develop emotional regulation skills and to understand that especially in children and adolescents, negative emotions can disrupt the learning process in the brain. Emotional regulation skills can help minimize disruptive learning processes as students become better equipped to deal with their various emotions. We also need to consider that though the brain comes primed for learning language, there are optimal times for the introduction and learning of new language skills. Research is showing that the earlier a student is introduced to foreign language instruction, the more efficiently the brain is at learning the accent and grammars associated with that language. Reading and math instruction also both need to be informed with neuroscience research. Based on how the brain learns to read, teachers involved in early reading instruction need to take a balanced approach to literacy. The balance may vary based on language, but both phonetic and whole word language learning needs to be taught. With math, the use of manipulatives is helpful in promoting numeracy and in building upon the basic number sense that all of us are born with. The communities and relationships in which children are raised in, as well as their own cultural context, will also impact how students learn. Such influences on a child's environment will affect how and what they have learned, and so consideration for these factors has to be incorporated into our learning environments. Finally, with new research comes new knowledge. Educators should be flexible and able to adapt to these changes and to consider how new knowledge can help to shape the learning environments for our students.
As always, the lovely Dr. Roz demystifies scientific research for us mere mortals. Over to you, Anna.
This is Anna Centauros reporting live from Kenora, Ontario. It has been raining for days, but that's not going to stop us today from delivering our news about inquiry-based learning. Inquiry-based learning supports our 21st century learners, and it includes inquiry, application, production, problem solving, and it's when students are learning about and solving real-world problems. Now there's three types of inquiry-based learning. It's divided into project-based, problem-based, and learning through design. Project-based is student-driven, and it's a completion of tasks where students transfer their learning to more complex problems and situations. These are real-world problems. So an example could be students gathering together to try and figure out where to put in a new recycling center in their town. Then there's problem-based. It's closely related to project-based, and it aims at teaching a specific problem, often about student experiences. So examples could be medical students gathering together to help solve problems about a patient's illness. The last is learning through design, and it's student-driven, where they are designing and creating. An example could be a boat building contest. So in order for inquiry-based learning to work, students need to be given opportunities to sustain engagement, collaborate with others, research, manage resources, and develop a performance or a product. These activities nurture students' abilities to analyze, think critically, write, and speak effectively, and problem solve, and it is authentic learning. So, if you're a teacher thinking about incorporating inquiry-based learning into your classroom, here's two things you need to think about. Number one is that small group inquiry. It needs to be guided by thoughtful curriculum with clearly defined learning goals. And the second is assessment. Assessment is key, and when it requires students to apply and measure what they've learned. Don't forget about collaboration. Many studies have proved that There are significant learning benefits when collaboration is involved. So there's 3 types of assessments for inquiry-based approaches. There's performance assessments, where the students are going through a task. There's evaluation tools like rubrics, and then there's formative assessments. Assessment is crucial for both the student and the teacher as a learner. An assessment can make or break how effective inquiry-based learning can be. And teachers, don't forget to think about the challenges of inquiry-based learning. The challenges are that it can be difficult to implement because it needs proper structuring, modeling, and scaffolding. And inquiry-based learning can be a lot of work for teachers. It requires teachers to be organized, highly knowledgeable, and flexible because you never know where the day might take you. Teachers must always be ready to help their students in whatever way is needed. Inquiry-based learning also takes time. But these challenges can be overcome by thoughtful planning and for the teacher to truly understand their role as a facilitator by providing feedback, resources, and direction when needed. The students need a place where they feel safe to explore and collaborate and reflect. Alright, that's it for now. Thank you for watching. I'm Anna Centauros reporting from Kenora, Ontario. You stay classy, UFC.
This is Elizabeth Eddy signing on live from a dog walk in Whitehorse, Yukon. I'm here to introduce you to some of the discussion questions that we have. So, it says here, choose from one of the 2 following options that will be posted on D2L. So question number 1. From ideas discussed in the readings and on our newscast, which, if any idea, would you like most to embrace or build upon in your current setting? Do you foresee any problems or obstacles to this process? Question number 2 to choose from. Picking from some or all of the chapters presented this week, which lines do you feel you connected with the most? And please explain.
Up next, we have Kathy on site at the Calgary Zoo to discuss recent research on group dynamics.
This is reporter Kathy Weidrich at the Calgary Zoo 1 year after the flood of the century. The animals are mostly comfortably back in their environments and in their routines. However, zookeepers are also noticing some interesting new group dynamics. After the extraordinary nature of their flood experience, are the animals realizing how traditional and mundane their lives were before? Are they now working together to create an exciting social and engaging environment where they can develop the creative and interactive skills they feel they might need in preparation for if there is a repeat experience? Why, I think so. And it looks like cooperative learning is everywhere. In fact, we're seeing 2 major characteristics of cooperative learning: structured behavior to achieve group goal, and individual accountability for greater group success. And here are some animals right now, partaking in one of the hallmarks of encouraging individual accountability, a reward system, in this case some sweet-tasting hay. So, apart from the commonalities around cooperative learning as just mentioned, the different types of structured cooperative learning really do not vary that much, with each just basically being what's called student team learning, or STL, exactly as already described. But the variations each have a twist. For instance, student teams achievement divisions, or STAD, like STL but specifying 4-member heterogeneous teams like our ostriches and zebras here, or Teams Games Tournament, or TGT, like STAD but with weekly tournaments as the assessment. And look at these pals anyway. That's right, it's PALS, PALS, the cooperative learning structure where pairs of students take turns as teacher and student. So it seems we can all rest assured that, just as structured cooperative learning is a robust tool for the changing paradigm for 21st century human learners, the animals of the zoo are also experiencing its value for helping them to face their changed paradigm head on. This is Kathy Weidrich signing off from a newly revitalized Calgary Zoo. A great thing.
Also on D2L, we will have some additional resources for you to look at. And I know we all have lots of spare time, but if you feel that you connect with any of the readings, you can use that for your postings. We have many sponsors that have made this all very possible. Our first sponsor, of course, the University of Calgary and the Workland School of Education. D2L has also made this possible, and we could not forget Adobe Connect. And once again, this is Elizabeth Eddy signing out from Whitehorse, Yukon.
It certainly has been an evening of discovery. Be sure to add your 2 cents on Twitter, Adobe Connect, and D2L. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on next week's edition of the Grad School Gabbers.